The rain poured heavily, the gray sky casting a dull light over the small alley behind the mansion. Maya, the black maid, sat on the cold pavement, her back pressed against the damp brick wall of the building. She had barely noticed the rain as she ate the small meal she had brought with her from the kitchen, a simple sandwich and an apple. The sound of the rain was constant, a rhythmic patter that drowned out everything else around her. It was the only sound that filled the silence of the space she found herself in. The night had been long, and the house inside was bustling with the life of the wealthy family she served. Yet, here she was, outside, alone, eating in the rain. She didn't mind. It had become a routine. The mansion was full, the halls were beautiful, but none of it mattered to her. Maya had always been the invisible one, the one who worked behind the scenes. She didn't expect the lavish lifestyle the family enjoyed, nor did she desire it. All she ever wanted was to do her job well and provide for herself. Still, the rain stung her face as it fell in sheets, and the cold seeped into her bones. As she finished the last bite of her sandwich, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and looked up at the sky, feeling the weight of the loneliness pressing down on her shoulders. No one ever noticed her. No one cared. She wasn't important. But in the quiet of that alley, in the cold embrace of the rain, Maya felt a strange sense of peace. She could be herself here, away from the eyes of the family she served, away from the expectations, away from the judgments. She didn't need their approval or their praise. All she needed was to survive. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the rain wash over her face, feeling the chill but also feeling something else. Something that was not bitterness or resentment, but something deeper, more enduring. She had learned long ago that kindness didn't always come with a reward. Sometimes, it was just enough to know you had done the right thing, even if no one saw it. Maya stood up, brushing off the wetness from her uniform. She looked back at the mansion, its towering presence looming above her. Inside, they were living their lives, completely unaware of her struggles, but she didn't need them to notice her. She didn't need their praise. As she gathered the empty wrapper of her sandwich and headed back inside, she knew that, despite everything, she would keep going. She would keep working, keep being kind, even if no one ever acknowledged her. She would do it because it was who she was, and that, in its own way, was enough. As Maya walked back into the mansion, her heart still heavy from the cold, she knew that the warm light inside would only remind her of how little she truly belonged. The grand marble floors gleamed under the chandeliers, and the house was buzzing with activity. She walked past the staff lounge, where the other workers were chatting, their voices high and cheerful. Maya's steps slowed as she tried to shake off the chill, but the weight of the unspoken rules that governed the mansion seemed to grow heavier with each step. She had never been part of the social circles here. She was just the maid, the one who cleaned, who served, who made sure everything ran smoothly while the family went about their perfect lives. Her role had always been clear. She had learned to accept it long ago, that she was meant to be invisible, to blend into the background of the mansion's polished world. But even as she accepted this, there was a quiet longing deep inside her. She had dreams, too. Dreams that seemed too big, too far out of reach for someone like her. Yet, she held on to them, quietly, in the back of her mind. As she passed by the kitchen, she noticed the head butler, Mr. Wilson, barking orders at the staff. He barely acknowledged her as she walked past. Maya knew that no one in the house ever took the time to learn her name or ask how she was doing. She was just part of the furniture, like the tables and chairs, useful but unimportant. And yet, despite the distance the family kept, Maya could never shake the feeling that something was missing in their lives. They had everything: wealth, power, luxury, but there was a coldness to them, an emptiness that she could feel even from a distance. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. She turned to see Mr. Thomas Beckett, the billionaire who owned the mansion, walking toward her with his usual air of authority. His sharp suit contrasted against the warmth of the house, and his cold eyes met hers for a split second before he looked away. Maya's heart skipped a beat, though she tried to hide it. It was hard not to notice him, the man who ruled over everything in the mansion, the man who never spoke to her unless it was to give an order. He was known for being ruthless, focused only on the business side of life, but something about him intrigued her. There was a story behind his eyes, a hidden sorrow that Maya could sense but never understood. Mr. Beckett stopped in front of her, his gaze briefly flicking to the small piece of food she was still holding in her hand, half-eaten from earlier. "You should be inside," he said curtly, his voice cold as usual. Maya nodded, offering him a polite smile, though inside, she wondered what had caused the sudden change in his demeanor. She wasn't used to him speaking to her unless absolutely necessary. "I'll finish my shift soon," Maya replied quietly, hoping he wouldn't press the matter. There was an uncomfortable silence between them for a moment, and Maya began to feel the weight of his gaze. She shifted uncomfortably on her feet, unsure of what to say. "You're always so quiet," Mr. Beckett said after a beat. "Most of the staff, they're loud, always gossiping. But you," he trailed off, studying her with a look she couldn't quite decipher. Maya swallowed, trying not to feel self-conscious. "I prefer to keep to myself," she replied, her voice steady. It wasn't a lie. She had always preferred to stay in the background, to avoid drawing attention to herself. She was used to being invisible, to not being noticed. But there was something about Mr. Beckett's words, the way he said them, that made her feel seen for the first time. He studied her for a moment longer before his expression softened, just slightly. "I suppose that's a good quality," he muttered, almost to himself, before turning to walk away. Maya watched him leave, her thoughts swirling in her mind. It was the first time he had ever said something like that to her, and it felt strange. For a moment, she wondered if he truly meant it, or if it was just a passing comment. She quickly brushed off the thought, telling herself that it didn't matter. She was just the maid, and it was probably nothing more than a fleeting moment of kindness, if it could even be called that. But as Mr. Beckett disappeared down the hall, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Maybe it was just her imagination, but she couldn't help but wonder if, in that brief exchange, she had somehow made an impression on him. She walked back to her duties, trying to focus on the tasks at hand, but her mind kept drifting back to the strange moment with the billionaire. Was it possible that, despite everything, someone like him could see her? The next morning, the mansion was alive with the sound of clinking china and the hum of quiet conversations. Maya entered the kitchen, wiping the sleep from her eyes as she prepared breakfast for the family. She moved with practiced ease, her mind still preoccupied with the brief exchange she had with Mr. Beckett the night before. The moment kept replaying in her head. She couldn't understand why it felt so significant. It wasn't like he had said anything extraordinary. Yet, there was something about the way he looked at her, the brief flicker of emotion in his eyes. Maya shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. She had work to do, and that's all that mattered. As she chopped vegetables for the morning omelet, the door to the kitchen swung open, and in walked Mr. Beckett. Maya's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly composed herself, not allowing the shock to show. He had never come into the kitchen before, let alone during breakfast time. "Good morning, Maya," he said in his usual cold tone. Maya froze for a moment, surprised by the sudden politeness. She didn't know how to respond. "Good morning, sir," she replied, keeping her voice steady. He stood there for a moment, watching her work. The silence between them felt heavier this time, thicker, as if there was something unsaid hanging in the air. Maya tried to focus on the task at hand, but she couldn't shake the feeling that his presence was somehow different today. "I need you to go upstairs and check on the guest room," he said finally, breaking the silence. "There's a problem with the heating. Make sure everything is in order." Maya nodded, trying to mask the confusion on her face. She had never been asked to do anything like that before, especially not by Mr. Beckett himself. He usually didn't concern himself with the details of the house. "Of course, sir," she said, setting the knife down and wiping her hands on her apron. She couldn't help but wonder if this was another attempt to see her, to test her in some way. As she walked toward the stairs, she felt his eyes on her back. When she reached the guest room, she found the heating unit was malfunctioning, just as Mr. Beckett had said. Maya checked the system and made a few adjustments, tightening a few screws here and there. It wasn't a difficult job, but it was a rare one for someone in her position. Most of the staff were assigned to more menial tasks, but here she was, fixing something that involved actual skill. When she finished, she stepped back and admired her work for a moment. The room was warm again, the air smelling faintly of lavender from the candles on the nightstand. As she was about to leave, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned, and there stood Mr. Beckett once more, his tall figure filling the doorway. "Thank you for fixing the heating," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I didn't expect you to handle it so quickly." Maya was taken aback by his unexpected praise. It wasn't much, but it was more than she had ever received from him before. She didn't know what to say. "It was nothing, sir," she replied, feeling suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. "I'm glad I could help." Mr. Beckett stepped closer, his eyes still studying her. There was something different about him today. His usual coldness seemed to have softened, and in its place, there was a kind of quiet curiosity. "You're not just a maid, are you?" he asked, almost as if he were speaking to himself. Maya didn't know how to respond. She had always kept her past hidden, never sharing too much with anyone, especially not with the family she worked for. But something about Mr. Beckett made her hesitate. "I'm just doing my job, sir," she said, keeping her voice even. "That's all." Mr. Beckett nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Maya standing there, unsure of what had just happened. She didn't know why he had come to speak to her today, or why he had looked at her in that way. It was as if something had shifted between them, something she couldn't quite understand. As she made her way back down the stairs, she couldn't help but feel that this moment, this strange exchange, marked the beginning of something different. But what, exactly? She wasn't sure. She had always been invisible in this mansion, a mere background figure in the lives of the family she served. But now, for the first time, she felt as though she might actually matter. The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. She wasn't sure what the future would bring, but for the first time, she felt like she might have a place in it. She didn't know if this was just a passing moment or if it was the start of something more, but she couldn't deny that she felt a shift, a spark of something new. As Maya walked back into the kitchen later that afternoon, her hands still slightly trembling from the unexpected encounter with Mr. Beckett, she tried to push aside the flood of emotions that had begun to stir within her. The warmth of the kitchen, the smells of fresh pastries and brewing coffee, should have been comforting, but instead, they only reminded her of how out of place she felt. She had spent so many years in this mansion, serving the family, working behind the scenes, never asking for attention. She had always been content in her silence, content in the shadows. But now, something was different. The brief words exchanged with Mr. Beckett kept replaying in her mind. "You're not just a maid, are you?" he had said. His words haunted her more than they should have. What did he mean by that? Why did he look at her as if he saw something beyond the uniform, beyond the role she had always played? She had never considered herself special. She was just a woman trying to survive, doing her best in a world that rarely noticed her. But for the first time, she began to question if there was more to her than just the work she did. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden ringing of the phone. Maya reached over and picked it up, still lost in thought. "Maya, I need you to come up to the study," came the voice of Mrs. Beckett, her employer's wife. The request was routine, a simple task. Maya had no reason to be nervous. She had done hundreds of errands like this before. But today, for some reason, her heart raced as she made her way up the grand staircase. As she approached the study, her breath caught in her throat. She had been in this room 1,000 times before, but today, it felt different. The grand mahogany desk, the bookshelves lined with volumes of knowledge, the expansive windows overlooking the estate, everything felt imposing, overwhelming. She knocked softly on the door, and Mrs. Beckett's voice called her in. Inside, Mrs. Beckett was seated at the desk, papers spread out before her, but there was a noticeable tension in her posture. "Maya," she said as she looked up, "I need you to help with something important. We've got a charity event coming up, and we need you to prepare the guest list. I'll need you to check with the kitchen staff to ensure everything is set for the guests we'll be hosting." Maya nodded, the task not being unusual, but she noticed a slight unease in Mrs. Beckett's voice. It wasn't like the usual orders she received. Something felt off, but Maya couldn't place it. "Of course, Mrs. Beckett," Maya said, trying to keep her tone steady. As she turned to leave the room, Mrs. Beckett's voice stopped her. Maya, just so you know, she began, a brief pause hanging in the air. Mr. Beckett has taken notice of you. You've been doing an excellent job around here. Keep it up. Maya blinked, caught off guard by the praise. Mr. Beckett? Noticing her? The words hung in the air, and for a moment, she wondered if Mrs. Beckett had meant something else. She had never been given compliments like that before, especially not by someone as important as Mr. Beckett. She managed a quiet, "Thank you," before stepping out of the room, her mind racing. What did all of this mean? Was she imagining things, or had something truly shifted between her and the Beckett family? She returned to the kitchen, her hands now gripping the counter as she tried to steady her breath. She was just the maid, she reminded herself. She had always been just the maid. But the words of Mrs. Beckett and the lingering look from Mr. Beckett earlier filled her thoughts. Maybe, just maybe, there was something more waiting for her here. Maybe she wasn't just invisible. Maya tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to that moment, that small exchange with Mr. Beckett, the way he had looked at her, as if she were more than just a servant. It was absurd, she knew. He was a billionaire, a man who had everything. She was just someone who worked for him, and yet, that lingering question still haunted her. Could it be that he saw her as more than just the maid? Could he have seen something in her that no one else had? She didn't know, and part of her was afraid to find out. But as the hours passed, as the mansion continued to bustle around her, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was changing, that somehow, against all odds, she might be more than just invisible in this world. The next few days passed in a blur of routine. Maya continued to do her job with the same precision, moving silently through the mansion, ensuring everything was in order. She made sure the guests' rooms were ready, the kitchen was stocked, and the house gleamed with perfection. But despite the endless tasks, her mind often wandered back to the strange exchange she had had with Mr. Beckett. She couldn't help but think about the way he had looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. His words echoed in her mind. "You're not just a maid, are you?" Maya had always been careful to stay out of the spotlight, to keep her head down and avoid drawing attention to herself. But now, for some reason, she couldn't escape the feeling that something was changing. It wasn't just Mr. Beckett's words, it was everything about him that made her feel uneasy. His cold demeanor, his reserved nature, the way he seemed untouchable, all of it felt like a wall she could never cross. And yet, there were those brief moments when she caught glimpses of something else in him. Something human, something vulnerable. Maya knew she had to stay focused on her work. After all, she was just a maid, but the temptation to question everything was strong. Was she imagining things, or was there something more between her and Mr. Beckett? She wasn't sure, but she couldn't stop thinking about it. One evening, as she was finishing up her work, the door to the kitchen opened, and in walked Mr. Beckett again. Maya's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly masked her surprise. He was holding a glass of wine, dressed in his usual dark suit, his presence commanding the room. "Maya," he said, his voice steady as always. "Could you come with me for a moment?" Maya nodded, her stomach fluttering nervously. She had no idea what this could be about. She followed him through the hallways, her steps quick and quiet. They reached the large dining room, where a fire crackled in the hearth. Mr. Beckett turned to face her, his gaze softer than she had ever seen it. "I need your opinion on something," he said. "I've been working on a new project, and I'd like to get some feedback from you." Maya blinked in surprise. "From me, sir?" she asked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Yes," he said with a slight nod. "You see, the project involves some creative thinking, and I value your perspective." Maya wasn't sure what to say. She was just a maid. What could she possibly contribute to a project that a billionaire like Mr. Beckett was working on? But despite her hesitation, she tried to remain composed. "I'm happy to help, sir," she said, her voice steady. "What do you need from me?" Mr. Beckett walked over to a large desk at the far end of the room and pulled out a set of blueprints, placing them on the table. He motioned for her to come closer. "Take a look at these," he said. "I'm considering expanding the estate and adding some new features. I want to make sure the design feels welcoming, not just grand." Maya walked over, her eyes scanning the blueprints. She wasn't an architect, but she could tell that the plans were grand, with sprawling gardens and multiple guest houses. The designs were elegant, but there was something cold about them, something impersonal. "What do you think?" Mr. Beckett asked, his voice laced with curiosity. Maya looked at the plans for a moment longer, then gave a soft sigh. "I think it's beautiful, but maybe it's a bit too much," she said cautiously. "It feels like it's all about impressing people, not about creating a space where people can feel at home." Mr. Beckett stared at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he nodded slowly. "I see what you mean," he said quietly. "I hadn't thought about it that way." Maya felt a pang of surprise. Had she really just given him advice? She wasn't sure, but the idea that he was actually listening to her made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time valued. "You're right, Mr. Beckett continued, still looking at the plans. "It's easy to get caught up in the grandeur of it all. I've been so focused on making it bigger, better. But maybe it's time to think about the people who will actually live here." Maya was stunned by his words. It wasn't often that someone as powerful and wealthy as Mr. Beckett admitted to needing help or listening to someone like her. She had always thought of him as untouchable, a man who didn't care about anyone but himself. But now, in this moment, she saw a different side of him, a side that was uncertain, searching for something more. "Thank you for your input, Maya," he said, his tone softer now. "I appreciate it." Maya simply nodded, unsure of what to say. It felt surreal, like she had stepped into a new world where she mattered, in ways she never thought possible. As she left the dining room, she couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. For the first time, Mr. Beckett had seen her as something more than just a maid, and for the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, there was more to her life than just serving others. The days following their conversation in the dining room were filled with a subtle shift in the atmosphere between Maya and Mr. Beckett. The next time she saw him, he greeted her with a slight nod, a gesture that was somehow warmer than before. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but it was as if a silent understanding had been formed between them. Maya continued with her duties as usual, but now, she couldn't help but notice the small, quiet moments when Mr. Beckett would catch her eye, his gaze lingering for a fraction longer than necessary. At first, she wondered if she was just imagining things, but as the days went by, it became impossible to ignore. One afternoon, as Maya was organizing the library, Mr. Beckett approached her again. This time, there was no task to discuss, no plans to review. He simply stood there, watching her work for a moment. Maya felt a wave of unease wash over her, unsure of what this new dynamic meant. "Maya," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said the other day. About the house, about the design." Maya paused, a little surprised that he had brought it up again. "And?" she asked, not knowing exactly what she was expecting him to say. "And I've decided to change the plans," he said, his tone steady but tinged with an unusual humility. "I'm going to scale back the project. I want to make it more comfortable, more personal, something that feels like home." Maya was taken aback. This was a significant decision, one that could cost him a lot, and yet he was speaking about it with a sincerity she had never seen before. "I'm glad to hear that, sir," Maya replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. She wasn't sure how to react to such a bold move. After all, she was just the maid. What right did she have to influence such an important decision? "I owe you for that," Mr. Beckett continued, his gaze now fixed on her. "I've been so focused on business, on growth, that I forgot what really matters. You reminded me of that. I don't think I would have come to this decision without your perspective." Maya felt a strange flutter in her chest. She had never expected her words to have such an impact. She was just a quiet woman doing her job, and yet somehow, her opinion had made a difference in the life of one of the most powerful men she had ever known. "I didn't mean to change anything," she said quietly, not knowing what else to say. "I just spoke honestly." "That's exactly it," he replied, stepping a little closer. "Honesty. You've been honest with me in a way no one else has. It's refreshing." Maya felt her heart race. This conversation, this unexpected openness from Mr. Beckett, felt like a door was slowly being opened between them. She had never allowed herself to hope for anything more than the quiet, unnoticed life she had always led. But now, she found herself wondering if there could be something else, something more. As if reading her thoughts, Mr. Beckett continued, "I know I haven't been the easiest person to work for. I've been distant, focused only on the business. But that's changing. I'm going to make more of an effort to be present, to understand the people around me, especially you." Maya didn't know how to respond. She had spent so many years learning to keep her distance, to remain invisible. Now, with these words from him, she was faced with the unsettling thought that her life might change in ways she hadn't prepared for. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't sure if he even heard her, but he smiled slightly, nodding in acknowledgement. As he turned to leave, Maya stood there for a moment, staring at the spot where he had been. What had just happened? She wasn't sure, but the weight of his words stayed with her, and a quiet hope began to grow in her chest. She didn't know where this would lead, if anywhere. She had never allowed herself to think beyond the walls of the mansion, beyond the life she had built in the shadows. But now, she couldn't help but wonder if there was something more for her outside of the kitchen, outside of the servants' quarters. Could Mr. Beckett's words really mean something? Could he truly see her, not as just the maid, but as someone with worth, someone who mattered? Maya didn't know the answers, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of possibility. And for once, that spark didn't feel so far out of reach. It had been a few weeks since Mr. Beckett's change of heart, and Maya still couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting in her life. The days had passed with her continuing her work, as usual, but there was an undeniable difference in the air. Mr. Beckett's presence no longer felt as cold and distant. He would greet her with a nod whenever their paths crossed, and there was a new kind of respect in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. She was still the maid, still the woman who cleaned the floors and served the meals, but in those brief moments when their gazes met, it felt like she was something more. One afternoon, as Maya was walking through the hallway on her way to the staff kitchen, she heard a familiar voice calling her name. She turned to see Mr. Beckett standing at the end of the hall, his hands in his pockets, looking unusually casual. "Maya," he said, his tone carrying a sense of urgency, "could you come here for a moment?" Maya's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what this was about, but she couldn't help the nervous flutter in her stomach. She quickly nodded and made her way over to him. "Yes, sir?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. He didn't immediately speak, but instead motioned for her to follow him. They walked in silence, Maya's steps echoing in the grand hallways. When they reached his office, he closed the door behind them and turned to face her. "I need to apologize," he said, his voice sincere, yet filled with an emotion that was foreign to her. "I've been thinking about the way I've treated you, the way I've treated everyone, really. I've been so focused on my work that I failed to see the people around me, you included." Maya blinked, unsure of what he meant. She had never expected an apology from him, especially not for something she hadn't really thought was his fault. "I don't understand," she said softly, not wanting to make him feel uncomfortable. "I haven't done anything to deserve an apology." Mr. Beckett shook his head, his expression serious. "That's just it, Maya. You've always done your job without question, without asking for anything in return, and I took that for granted. I took you for granted." Maya felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. She had never been the type to expect gratitude, never asked for anything beyond what she was given, and yet, here he was, standing before her, admitting to something she hadn't even realized needed apologizing for. "You've been more than just a maid," he continued, his voice softening. "You've been a steady presence, someone who has held this place together without anyone noticing. And for that, I'm sorry. I've overlooked your worth, and I'm sorry for that." Maya was speechless. She had never thought of herself as important. She was just someone who worked behind the scenes, doing her job to the best of her ability, never asking for acknowledgement or praise. And yet, here was Mr. Beckett, the man who owned everything, admitting that he had been wrong. "You don't have to apologize, sir," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just doing my job. I don't expect anything more." Mr. Beckett stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her heart race. "You deserve more," he said, his words laced with conviction. "I've realized that now. You've been working here for years, and all this time, I've treated you as nothing more than a servant. But that's not who you are. You're someone who deserves respect, someone who deserves recognition. I just wanted you to know that." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had never imagined this moment would come, never thought that someone like Mr. Beckett would ever see her as anything other than the help. But there he was, admitting his mistake, and offering her something she had never even dared to hope for. "Respect. Thank you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "That means more to me than you know." For a moment, there was silence between them, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Maya didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process everything that had just happened. She had always prided herself on being invisible, on staying in the background, never drawing attention to herself. But now, for the first time, she was seen. She wasn't just the maid. She was Maya, a person with value. As she turned to leave the room, Mr. Beckett's voice stopped her. "Maya," he called, his tone softer now. She turned to face him. "I want you to know that I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to treat the people around me with the respect they deserve, starting with you." Maya smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She didn't know where this would lead, what changes would come, but for the first time, she felt like something had shifted. And maybe, just maybe, that something was the beginning of a new life, one where she could be seen, not just as the maid, but as someone who mattered. The next morning dawned gray and heavy with clouds, the kind of sky that promised rain before the day was done. Maya woke early, as she always did, preparing for another long day in the mansion. But something inside her felt different. Ever since Mr. Beckett's apology, she couldn't stop thinking about how much things had changed. The weight that had always pressed against her chest seemed a little lighter now, as if the years of being invisible had finally started to fade. As she walked through the quiet hallways, she could hear the echo of her footsteps, the soft rhythm keeping her grounded. For the first time in a long while, she felt a quiet sense of peace. But life had a way of testing peace just when you started to believe it could last. Around mid-morning, the sky opened up, and rain began to fall in steady sheets against the mansion windows. The storm came without warning, and within minutes, the air was filled with the sound of water beating against the glass. Maya was helping in the kitchen when she noticed a leak forming in the hallway ceiling. Without hesitation, she grabbed a bucket and hurried over. As she placed it under the dripping water, she glanced through the large back window that looked out over the garden. That was when she saw him, Mr. Beckett, standing outside in the rain. He wasn't carrying an umbrella, and his suit was already soaked through. He was staring at something in the garden, completely still. Maya hesitated for a moment before stepping outside. The rain was cold against her skin, soaking through her clothes almost instantly. She approached him slowly, her shoes sinking slightly into the muddy ground. "Mr. Beckett?" she called softly, her voice barely audible over the downpour. He turned to her, his expression distant, almost haunted. "It's just water," he said, his voice hollow. "You don't have to come out here." But Maya didn't move. "You'll catch a cold," she said gently. He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Maybe that would be good for me," he said, his tone tinged with something that sounded like exhaustion. Maya's heart ached at the sight of him. For the first time, she saw not the billionaire, not the powerful man who commanded every room he entered, but a person who looked utterly lost. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. He was silent for a moment, staring at the statue in front of him, a marble angel that stood in the center of the garden. "My wife used to love this garden," he said finally. "She planted every flower you see here. She said it made her feel alive." His voice cracked slightly. "When she passed away, I stopped coming here. I couldn't stand to look at it. But today, for some reason, I felt like I had to." Maya's breath caught. She had never heard him speak of his wife before. Everyone in the house knew she had passed, but no one ever dared to mention it. "I am sorry," Maya said quietly, her words sincere. "She must have been a wonderful person." Mr. Beckett nodded, his eyes still fixed on the angel statue. "She was," he said softly. "She was kind, patient, nothing like me." He gave a bitter smile. "I've spent so much time trying to fill the void she left behind. Money, business, power. None of it works. None of it brings her back. Maya wanted to reach out to him, to tell him that it was okay to grieve, that it was okay to still feel the pain. But she didn't. She simply stood beside him in the rain, letting the silence speak for both of them. Sometimes, she said after a moment, the only way to honor someone's memory is to live in a way that would make them proud. He looked at her then, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name, sorrow, maybe, or gratitude. "You really believe that?" he asked. "I do," she said simply. "Because that's what my grandmother always told me. She used to say, love doesn't disappear when someone's gone. It just changes shape. It becomes the way we live, the way we treat others." Mr. Beckett stared at her for a long moment, the rain streaming down his face, indistinguishable from tears. Then, without a word, he nodded. "You should go inside," he said finally. "You're getting drenched." Maya smiled softly. "So are you," she replied, and for the first time, he smiled too, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. They stood there for a few seconds longer before heading back toward the mansion. As they stepped inside, the warmth of the house enveloped them, and Maya felt a quiet shift in the air. Something about that moment in the rain had changed everything. For the first time, Mr. Beckett had opened up to her, not as an employer to an employee, but as one human being to another. And though neither of them said it aloud, they both knew that the rain had washed away something heavy, the silence that had stood between them for far too long. As the days passed, Maya's life at the mansion seemed to take on a new rhythm. There was still the same work to be done, the same endless stream of tasks that needed to be completed, but somehow, it felt different now. The air between her and Mr. Beckett had changed in a way she couldn't quite explain. The distance that had once been there, the invisible line that separated them, no longer felt as thick. She still did her job, still went about her duties without fanfare, but now there was something new, a connection, a quiet understanding that had formed between them. It wasn't overt. There were no grand gestures, no promises of anything more than what was already there. But every time their paths crossed, there was a subtle shift in the air, something unspoken but undeniably present. Mr. Beckett seemed to be more at ease, less distant. He still had the weight of the world on his shoulders, still carried the burden of a life defined by power and loss. But there was something softer about him now, something more human. And Maya found herself noticing the small things, the way he would smile at her when she entered a room, the brief moments of vulnerability that would flicker across his face when he thought no one was watching. It was during one of these quiet moments that Maya found herself standing in the hallway, holding a tray of fresh coffee for Mr. Beckett. She knocked softly on the door to his study and stepped inside, as she had done 100 times before. But this time, something felt different. As she placed the tray on the desk, Mr. Beckett looked up from the papers in front of him. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was a silence between them, a silence that stretched longer than it should have. "Maya," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant, "would you sit down for a moment?" Maya blinked, unsure of what he meant. She had never been asked to sit down in his study before. She had always been the one to serve, never the one to be invited to share in the conversation. "Sir?" she asked, her voice filled with cautious curiosity. Mr. Beckett motioned to the chair across from him. "Please," he said again, his tone more insistent now. Maya hesitated for a moment before slowly sitting down, placing her hands in her lap, unsure of what to expect. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. Mr. Beckett studied her for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful, almost as if he were trying to find the right words. "I've been thinking," he began slowly, "about the way I've lived my life, about the choices I've made. I've spent so much time focusing on my business, on the image I've built for myself, but there's something I've been missing all this time." Maya stayed silent, unsure of how to respond. What could she say? She was just the maid, the one who worked in the background, never asking for anything. "I've neglected the people around me," he continued, his voice softer now, "and I've neglected the way I treat the people who work for me, especially you, Maya. You've been here for so long, and I've never taken the time to truly see you, to appreciate you for who you are, not just for the work you do." Maya felt a knot form in her stomach. This wasn't like him. Mr. Beckett had never shown this kind of vulnerability before, and she didn't know how to handle it. She had always seen him as untouchable, a man above everything and everyone. But here he was, speaking to her as if she mattered, as if she had a place in his life beyond the walls of the mansion. "I just wanted to say thank you," he added, his voice filled with sincerity. "Thank you for everything you've done, for the way you've kept this place running, for the way you've been here all these years without asking for anything in return." Maya's breath caught in her throat. She had never expected this. She had never expected to hear words like that from him. She had always been the quiet one, the one who worked without complaint, without asking for recognition. And now, here he was, offering her gratitude. For a long moment, Maya didn't know what to say. She had always been taught to be humble, to never expect anything for her work. But in this moment, sitting across from Mr. Beckett, she felt something stir inside her, something she hadn't felt in years, the recognition that she, too, had value. "I'm just doing my job, sir," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. "I never expected anything more." Mr. Beckett looked at her for a long moment, his gaze softening. "You deserve more," he said simply. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Maya didn't know how to respond. She wasn't sure what he meant by that, what he wanted from her. But in that moment, she realized something she didn't need to know. For the first time, it didn't matter what the future held. What mattered was that, in this quiet room, she was seen, and that was enough. Days turned into weeks, and the subtle changes in Maya's life continued to unfold, quietly shifting the rhythm of her world. There was no dramatic moment, no sudden revelation, but it was clear that something had transformed between her and Mr. Beckett. The space between them, once thick with formality and distance, was now filled with a kind of unspoken understanding. She could sense it in the way he treated her now, with a respect that had never been there before, as if he truly saw her for the first time. They still kept their interactions professional, but there was something different in the air. The mansion, once a place where Maya moved in the shadows, now felt less like a gilded cage and more like a place she could exist in. One evening, after a long day of work, Maya was walking down the hallway, heading back to the staff quarters when she heard her name. She turned and saw Mr. Beckett standing at the far end of the hall, looking at her with a calm expression. She stopped in her tracks, uncertain of what this moment might bring. "Maya," he called, his voice softer than usual. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" She hesitated for a brief second before nodding. "Of course, sir." As she walked toward him, Maya felt a flutter in her chest. She had grown used to these small moments when he'd paused to speak with her, but they still made her heart race. When she reached him, he looked at her with that same quiet intensity that had been present ever since their first real conversation. "I've been thinking," he began, his tone thoughtful, almost hesitant, "about the changes I've been making in my life, and how I've been living." Maya nodded, waiting for him to continue. She had always been a listener, a quiet observer, and she knew that sometimes the most powerful thing she could offer was her silence. "I know I've been distant," he said, his gaze dropping to the floor for a moment. "I've been so focused on running this place, on controlling everything, that I forgot what truly matters, the people around me. And you," he paused, as if weighing his words carefully, "you've shown me something I've been missing. You've shown me that it's not about the grand gestures, the business deals, or the power I've spent so long trying to hold on to. It's about the simple things. It's about being present, about making the people around you feel seen, heard." Maya blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. She had never heard him speak like this before, and she wasn't sure what to say. "Sir, she began, but Mr. Beckett raised his hand, signaling for her to listen. "I want to ask you something," he said, his voice steady. "Would you be willing to stay on, not just as the maid, but in a more permanent role? I've been considering it, and I think you could help me with more than just the house." Maya's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if she had heard him correctly. "Help you, sir?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," he replied, his tone firm. "I need someone who can help me manage the day-to-day here. Someone who understands how things really work behind the scenes. You've been here long enough to see everything, and I trust your judgment." I want you to be more than just a staff member. I want you to be someone who helps shape the future of this place, someone who is truly valued for their input. Maya's mind raced as she processed his words. She had spent so many years working in the background, never once imagining that she could have a voice in the decisions that shaped the mansion or its inhabitants. She had never thought that someone like Mr. Beckett, a billionaire with his own empire, would see her as anything more than a servant. And yet, here he was, offering her a role that was entirely different from anything she had ever dreamed of. "I don't know what to say, sir," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You've always been more than this job, Maya," he interrupted gently. "I see that now. I want to give you the chance to prove it." Maya took a deep breath, her mind still spinning with the weight of his words. This was a moment that could change everything. She could stay in the shadows, continue doing the work she had always done, or she could step into the light and take a chance on something entirely new. She had never been someone to seek the spotlight, but she had also never imagined a life where she could be seen for who she truly was. "I'll stay," she said finally, her voice steady with newfound resolve. "I'll help however I can." Mr. Beckett smiled, a look of genuine appreciation crossing his face. "Thank you, Maya," he said. "I'm glad you said that." As she walked away, her heart still racing with the enormity of the moment, Maya realized that she had just made a decision that would change the course of her life. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time, she felt like she had a place in it. She wasn't just a maid, and she wasn't just an observer. She was someone who mattered. And that knowledge was worth more than anything else. Weeks passed, and Maya found herself stepping into a new role within the mansion. She was no longer just the maid who worked behind the scenes. She had become something more, a trusted presence, someone whose opinion mattered. Her days were filled with tasks that required more than just cleaning and serving. Mr. Beckett had given her the responsibility of helping to manage the day-to-day operations of the mansion, and with each passing day, Maya proved herself capable of handling the demands. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed by the new expectations placed upon her, but there was also a sense of pride that came with knowing she was seen for who she truly was. She had always known she had value, but now, Mr. Beckett's recognition had made her believe it. It wasn't just about the work, it was about the respect she had earned, something she had never received before. One evening, as Maya was going over some paperwork in the study, Mr. Beckett entered the room. He looked different, somehow more relaxed, less burdened by the weight of his business empire. He didn't seem like the same man who had once kept to himself, distant and unapproachable. He had changed, and so had she. "Maya," he said, his voice calm and steady, "I need to talk to you about something important." She looked up from the papers, her heart skipping a beat. "Of course, sir," she replied, standing up to give him her full attention. "What is it, Mr.?" Beckett walked over to the desk, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "I've been thinking a lot about everything about the house, about the changes we've made, about how we've both been moving forward." He paused, searching her face for a reaction. "I want you to know that I appreciate everything you've done. You've made a real difference here, and I think it's time to take things a step further." Maya felt a sense of unease wash over her. What did he mean by that? She had no idea, but she knew that Mr. Beckett had a way of surprising her. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "I've been thinking about the future," he said, his voice low. "And I realized something. You've become an integral part of this place. Not just as someone who works here, but as someone who helps guide it. You've been a steady presence, and I can't ignore that anymore." Maya blinked, not quite understanding. "I've been thinking about how we move forward, about expanding the mansion, about bringing more people into our circle. But I can't do this alone. I need someone who understands the heart of this place, someone who understands its soul." Maya's heart skipped. Was he offering her more responsibility, more influence? "I think it's time for you to be more involved," he said, almost as if reading her thoughts. "I want you to have a say in the decisions we make here, in how we shape the future of this place. I want you to help me lead." Maya's breath caught in her throat. Lead. The thought seemed surreal. She was just a maid, wasn't she? The idea that she could help lead, that her opinion mattered in ways beyond serving others, was something she had never imagined. But here he was, asking her to be part of something bigger, something more meaningful. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. I mean, I've never done anything like this before. I'm not sure if I'm the right person. Mr. Beckett smiled softly, the warmth in his expression a stark contrast to the man he had once been. I'm sure, he said. I've seen what you're capable of. You've proven yourself time and time again. I trust you, Maya. I believe in you. Maya's heart swelled with emotion, and for a moment, she felt overwhelmed by the weight of his words. She had never imagined that this could be her life, that she could go from the shadows, from being invisible, to standing beside someone like Mr. Beckett, helping to shape the future of the mansion. I don't know what to say, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Just say yes, he replied with a grin. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle in her chest. This was more than just a job. This was a new beginning, a chance to prove not just to Mr. Beckett, but to herself, that she was more than what she had been. Yes, she said, her voice firm with conviction. I'll do it. Mr. Beckett smiled, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of something truly different in him. Not the powerful businessman, but the man who had found someone he could trust, someone who could help him move forward. Good, he said, his tone filled with genuine appreciation. I'm glad. I'm looking forward to what we can accomplish together. Maya stood there for a moment, her heart racing. This was it, the moment that would change everything. She wasn't just the maid anymore. She was someone with a future, someone whose worth had been recognized. And as she looked at Mr. Beckett, she knew that this was the beginning of something she could never have imagined, a future that was hers to shape. It had been several months since Maya had accepted Mr. Beckett's offer to be more involved in the decision-making process at the mansion. The changes in her life had been gradual, but undeniable. Her role had expanded far beyond what she had ever imagined, and with each passing day, she became more confident in her abilities. She was no longer just a maid. She was someone who had a say in the direction the mansion was heading, someone whose opinion mattered. She worked closely with Mr. Beckett, overseeing the staff, helping with organizational decisions, and even contributing her ideas to new projects. The respect he had shown her, the trust he had placed in her, gave her the strength to step up in ways she never thought possible. But even as Maya found herself growing into this new role, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. Despite the changes, the mansion felt the same, grand, cold, and filled with emptiness. She had never wanted to change it completely, but now, as she had a larger hand in its direction, she couldn't ignore the realization that the mansion needed more than just renovations. It needed a change of heart. One evening, as she was walking down the hall after a long day, she stopped in front of the grand staircase, gazing at the family portraits that lined the walls. They had been there for years, each frame a snapshot of the Beckett family legacy. Mr. Beckett's late wife, Elena, was in almost every one, a constant reminder of the past. Maya knew how much Elena had meant to him. She had heard the stories, seen the way Mr. Beckett would sometimes stare at her portrait, lost in thought. It was clear that he had never truly moved on from her death. But as much as he had changed in the time that Maya had known him, it was evident that the mansion was still tied to the past, to the memories of what had been. Maya knew that this was something she couldn't change alone. She needed to have a conversation with Mr. Beckett, one that might be difficult but was necessary for both of them. The next morning, Maya requested a meeting with him. She had never asked for a private conversation before, so it was a bit unusual, but she felt it was the right time. When he agreed, they met in his office. Maya could feel the weight of the conversation she was about to have, but she also knew that it was time to speak her mind. Mr. Beckett, she began, sitting across from him, I've been thinking a lot about the changes we've made here, about the direction we've taken. He looked at her, his eyes calm but curious. And, he asked, leaning back in his chair, I think we've made a lot of progress, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished, she said, choosing her words carefully. But there's something I've noticed. The mansion, the estate, they still feel empty, not just in the literal sense, but in the way the space feels. It's hard to explain, but it's as if the house is still haunted by the past, by memories that haven't been fully let go of. Mr. Beckett was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on her. Maya could feel the tension in the room, but she continued. I know how much Elena meant to you, she said gently, and I know it's not easy to move on from that. But I think it's time to create a space that's not just a reflection of what was, but of what could be. For both of us. Mr. Beckett didn't respond right away. Instead, he stared at the desk in front of him, deep in thought. Maya could see the conflict in his eyes. He had always been a man of control, a man who built his life around power and precision, but now, she saw a vulnerability that he had never shown before. "I've been holding on to the past, haven't I?" he said quietly, almost to himself. "I thought that by keeping everything the way it was, I could hold on to her, keep her close." Maya nodded, understanding. "I think it's natural to want to hold on to those we love," she said softly. "But sometimes, in order to move forward, we have to let go. Not forget, but let go." Mr. Beckett looked at her, his expression softer now. "I've never really known how to do that," he admitted. "Everything I've done, every decision I've made, has been about keeping her memory alive. But maybe it's time for me to let go, to stop living in the past." Maya smiled gently. "You don't have to forget her, sir. You can still honor her memory, but it's time to make room for the future, for new memories, new opportunities." He looked at her for a long time, as if weighing her words. Finally, he nodded. "You're right," he said, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "It's time." Maya felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had known this conversation would be difficult, but she also knew it was necessary. Mr. Beckett was ready to move forward, and that was something she could never have imagined even a few months ago. Together, they could shape the future of the mansion, of their lives, and Maya, for the first time, felt like she truly had a place in it, not as just the maid, but as someone who was integral to the future, someone who had helped shape the path they would take. The mansion, once a symbol of the past, was now a place filled with promise, a promise they would build together. Months had passed since that pivotal conversation, and Maya could hardly recognize the mansion now. The changes had been profound, not just in the physical space, but in the lives of everyone who lived and worked within its walls. The rooms that once felt empty now had a warmth, a life to them. The gardens, which had been meticulously maintained, now reflected the new beginning that had started within these walls. The weight of the past had not been erased, but it had been given its proper place, honored and remembered, but not allowed to overshadow the future. Maya had become an integral part of the mansion's transformation. Her role had grown, not just as someone who managed the household's needs, but as a true partner to Mr. Beckett in making decisions about the future. Together, they had charted a course that balanced honoring the past with embracing the possibilities ahead. There were challenges, of course. Change was never easy, and there were moments when doubt crept in, when the old ways of thinking threatened to return. But Maya and Mr. Beckett faced them together. They had learned to trust each other, to value each other's perspectives, and in doing so, they built something stronger than just a mansion. They built a partnership. One afternoon, as Maya sat in the study, reviewing some plans for the estate's new wing, Mr. Beckett entered the room. She looked up from her papers, and for a moment, their eyes met across the space. There was something different now, something more comfortable in their silence, as if they had both found their place in the world. "Maya," he said, his voice calm, but there was an underlying sense of pride in it. "I've been thinking about how far we've come, about everything we've accomplished together." Maya smiled, a sense of satisfaction filling her. She had never expected this kind of recognition, never imagined she would play such a central role in the changes within the mansion. "It's been a lot of work," she said, "but it's been worth it. We've made a home here, not just a house." Mr. Beckett nodded, stepping closer to her. "And we're not done yet," he said. "There's still more to do, more to build. But I wanted to take a moment to thank you. Without you, none of this would have been possible. You've helped me see the world differently, Maya. You've helped me see what really matters." Maya's heart swelled with emotion, and for a moment, she found herself speechless. This wasn't just the thanks of an employer to an employee. This was something deeper, more personal. It was a recognition of her worth as a person, not just as a member of the staff. "I couldn't have done it without you, sir," she said softly, her voice full of sincerity. "You gave me the opportunity to help, to be a part of something bigger, and I'm grateful for that." Mr. Beckett smiled, the familiar intensity in his eyes now softened with warmth. "I've learned a lot from you, Maya," he said. "Not just about managing the house, but about life. You've shown me that it's not about power or control, but about connection, trust, and the people who make our lives worth living." Maya felt a tear slip down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. This wasn't a moment for tears, but for gratitude for all that had been accomplished, and for all that was still to come. "I think we've created something special here," Maya said quietly. "Something that honors the past, but also looks to the future. It's a place where we can both grow, and where the people who live here can feel that they matter." Mr. Beckett reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but reassuring. "We've built this together," he said, his voice full of quiet pride, "and we'll continue to build it, one step at a time." Maya nodded, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She had found her place here, not just in the mansion, but in the world, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, truly valued. The mansion had been a symbol of wealth and power, a place where the past held tight to its grip. But now, it was a home. A home filled with the promise of a future where both she and Mr. Beckett could be their true selves, where they could live and work together, side by side. As Maya looked at Mr. Beckett, she realized that this journey, this new life they had built, was just beginning. There was still so much more to come, so many more steps to take, but as long as they took them together, she knew they would create something that would last, something meaningful, something that could stand the test of time. And for the first time in her life, Maya knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. This captivating story delves into the transformative journey of a black maid, who goes from being invisible in a luxurious mansion to becoming an integral part of its future. Through powerful moments of change, trust, and mutual respect, the narrative unfolds as Maya helps her employer, Mr. Beckett, not only manage the estate but also rediscover his own humanity. As the two work together to shape the mansion's future, Maya proves that strength and value are not defined by one's position, but by the impact they have on the world around them. In this heartfelt tale of personal growth and redemption, themes of self-worth, empowerment, and overcoming adversity emerge. This black story highlights the power of transformation, both in the physical world of the mansion and within the hearts of those involved. With Maya's influence, Mr. Beckett begins to see beyond his own grief and embraces a future where both of them can thrive. The mansion, once a place defined by loss and control, becomes a symbol of new beginnings and hope. This black story reminds us that no matter our past, we all have the power to shape our future with courage, determination, and compassion. Witness how Maya's journey empowers her to create a home built not just on wealth, but on respect and the pursuit of happiness. In every step she takes, Maya challenges the limits of what society expects of her, making this a truly inspiring black story of resilience and change.